A very good morning to you and welcome to K24 This Morning. My name is Mungala Mbuvi and today I'm sitting in for Jeff Morty at this particular juncture as we go through the newspapers. So do stand by because I'll be letting you know exactly what we are talking about. Speaking of which, let us start with the People Daily newspaper where the headline says that 2 are dead as chaos mars the DP meeting. Now, another showdown looms today with Ruto allied MPs threatening to storm the Jubilee headquarters in spite of warnings from Kieleweke leaders that it will be closed for fumigation. That particular story is on page 4. Now, in case you didn't know that, gangs clashed in Murang'a County yesterday. One was in support of Deputy President William Ruto, while the other was against his visit. And 2 people, unfortunately, lost their lives. As you can see, there are captions from various leaders, starting with the DP. And he says that, I want to apologize on behalf of the Kenyan government and promise this will never happen again. Alice Wahome, Kandara MP, as well, says, how can we not host the deputy president just because some people do not want him here? The IG, Hilary Mutyambai, says that, indeed, we urge politicians to desist from engaging in insightful utterances and acts. Stern action will be taken against the person or any person planning and executing unlawful acts. Some good stories there as well, including Kenya's Bridget Kosgei, who ran yesterday at the London Marathon and came in first in 2 hours, 18 minutes and 58 seconds. More stories as far as that is concerned on the People Daily. Congestion worries as well after mass exodus from private schools. That story is on page 8 of the People Daily. You can grab your copy, by the way, by dialing star 550 star 4 hash. And for only 10 shillings, get your copy of the People Daily. Also, right here, we're giving you the chance to win yourself some 250 bob worth of airtime. And all you have to do is give us a screenshot of that purchase, and we shall definitely award you that particular airtime. Remember, first come, first serve, so get down to it and let's do this. Looking at the second paper here, we're going to the Daily Nation. The front page says that outrage as fight takes deadly turn. That is on the front page of the Daily Nation. Now, Jubilee Wars police boss orders arrest of MPs Ndindi Nyoro and Alice Wahome Kandara MP over violent protests that claimed the lives of 2 people ahead of Deputy President William Ruto's visit to Murang'a. Now, the DP will still attend a church service and fundraiser, or rather still attended a fundraiser and blamed his rivals in Jubilee, saying that his State House journey is unstoppable. Catch that story on page 5 of the Daily Nation. Also, something else, Kosgei reigns supreme. King Kipchoge is in pain as well. Again, Bridget Kosgei came in top at 2 hours, 18 minutes and 58 seconds at the London Marathon. COVID-19 risk as well. Kenyans have thrown caution to the wind following the relaxation of some of the rules. Now experts say there is high risk of a second wave as infections surge in counties. Catch that story on page 10 of the Daily Nation. And also page 8 and 9, storm over gold deal. Kakamega residents demand details of 164 billion shillings project. Also, why Raila is upbeat. ODM leader says that the BBI report will be out in a matter of days. That story is on page 6 of your Daily Nation. Moving on to the Standard newspaper. Now, the pride and shame of Kenya, that is the headline that we're looking today on the Standard. Double face as the starter gun went off in London to signal Kenyans' chase for glory. Chaos rocked Murang'a in a parallel race for ignominy in the end. Now, the London win was followed by loss of 2 lives in political violence. What will it take to stop this madness? Page 5 of the Standard. Indeed, that story is right there. And also, on page 6 and 7, week 2 of teachers in school minus pupils. That is on page 6 and 7 of the Standard newspaper. Grab your copy indeed if you want to read more of that. And state prints, in quotes, about 15 billion in a week to plug hole. All right. Check that story indeed on your business edition of the Standard newspaper, page 24. And also at the top there on page 4, we are reminded that the BPI report will be unveiled in a few days. We move on to the Star newspaper. The front page says that Kidero and Uhuru aid in rent row. Well, that story is on page 2 as the PSA's COVID outbreak has undermined his ability to pay. Quite an interesting story there. And also a picture there that shows the ODM leader Raila Odinga. And it says that ODM leader Raila Odinga during a rally at Kawangware, Nairobi, again emphasizing that the BBI report will be out within days. That story is on page 6 of the Star. And about, on other pages like page 3, hike regularly to boost mental health, Nyandarua youth have been told. And on the page 24 of the Star, teachers save Nyeri girls from selling sex. For sanitary towels, grab your copy indeed. Also on page 30, thunder strikes 40 goats as banditry worsens in Baringo County. Welcome to K24 This Morning. Indeed, that is some of the things that are trending on your newspapers this morning. We shall get into it at this particular point. Once again, welcome to K24 This Morning. Allow me at this particular juncture to introduce my guest, and we shall start with the Executive Director, Amnesty International Kenya, Mr. Irungu Houghton. Welcome to the show, sir.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
All right, karibu tena sana. Also, we have Dennis Anyoka, the Advocate of the High Court, a frequent visitor on this particular show, and we are glad to have you, Mr. Dennis. Karibu tena sana.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
All right. And via Skype, we do have Jerotich Seii, an active citizen, would like to consider you a representative of Wanjiko, and of course would like to hear your thoughts on today's discussion. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
All right. And we also have on the phone Alex Muteti, Senior Assistant Director, Public Prosecutions at the Office of the DPP. Mr. Alex Muteti, if you can hear me, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Aya, karibu tena sana. Some of the things that we are discussing today, trending on the newspapers, and these are stories that have actually been, they've been there for quite a while. Corruption is such a big issue in this particular country. And I will just start with you, Mr. Irungu Houghton, because your organization is basically at the grassroots level, interacting with citizens and trying to understand exactly how this situation has literally crippled the country as an economy, and also as a culture and as a huge community. Maybe if we can just look at the situation as it is right now, what do you say, where do you think corruption is emanating? Because every single time when we look at the headlines, all we can see is money being lost here, money being lost there. Who is in charge?
So I think the first thing we need to start off by acknowledging is that the system is not broken. The system is designed this way. It is built around the idea that a small elite can essentially amass tremendous wealth in an economy with so much poverty.
Right.
And I think once we get that clear, then it becomes a bit more, I guess, easy to see what is going on and what is not going on. I often say that there are probably 5 groups that this country represents. So we can break down 47 million Kenyans into 5 groupings, 5% on either side.
Right.
Those who are actively pillaging and stealing from the public coffers and even from donors. Mm-hmm. And on the far side, there are the 5% that are actively trying to stop them.
Right.
In between, what you have is you have 2 groups. One group that is trying to, I guess, to become the 5% who are pillaging, mm-hmm. and another group that is trying to encourage the 5% who are trying to stop it.
Right.
And then in the middle, there's probably about 60 to 70% mm-hmm. of the population that is increasing, becoming despair, is beginning to despair, is cynical, and is fatalistic, that this somehow will be our fate, regardless of the fact that we have a constitution. And the cost of this essentially can be felt in the 700 deaths that we've seen during COVID-19. It can be seen in terms of the 1.7 million people who have lost their jobs, many of them between the age of 20 and 29. Much of what we need in order to bring children back to school, I mean, I think Kopet talked about 12 billion shillings is what's required to equip our schools, to keep them safe as our children return to schools. Much of that is essentially being lost just through corruption. I mean, just to give you one case, mm-hmm. the case of the KEMSA, not the med scandal, the KEMSA scandal is 2/3 of what we need to take children back to school. That one scandal.
Right.
And that can affect more than 20, 30 people in terms of beneficiaries. So I think that's the way to look at corruption. Mm-hmm. It is not essentially an aberration. It is not something that happens. Unfortunately, it is designed that way.
Okay. So clearly, by design, it's like things are just falling apart. Let me rope in Jerotich on this one. Jero, looking, or rather hearing what Mr. Irungu is saying, clearly 5% here, 5% here. Where do you think the citizens are falling in regards to that conversation? Are we even empowered in any way whatsoever, apart from just whistleblowing, to actually get in there and fight corruption as a people?
Okay, thank you. I don't know if my connection is very clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly well.
Okay, I completely agree with Irungu's analysis and assessment, so I do not need to go over that. I'm 100% with him in terms of that. I think the opportunity cost for corruption is very, very high for Kenyans in general. As you said, I represent Wanjiko. Actually, I don't represent Wanjiko. I'm Wanjiko. Many of us are Wanjiko. Those of us who are not part of a system that is embroiled in crony capitalism, in conflict of interest, in money laundering and kickbacks, and the vast majority of Kenyans are sitting there. Yeah. I focus on the energy sector, and I look at, I run the Switch Off KPLC campaign. If you look at the 150 billion shillings, for example, that have been stolen from KPLC over the past number of years, that represents 50% of county budgets. So we are looking at massive amounts of money disappearing every year steadily, a slow bleed, which has become a quick bleed. And we are effectively hemorrhaging as Kenyans. And it's going to be just a matter of time before our entire economy grinds to a standstill. But what I want to reflect on is the fact that we exist in an era of impunity. For example, the Chief Justice offered an advisory to the president around the dissolution of parliament. I have never seen a more belligerent, unrepentant, aggressive group of people saying you're not sending us home. So as Kenyans, we see that impunity starts at the very top. Whatever people do, nothing happens to them. You will see junior staffers being arrested, prosecuted, and even those cases disappear. A couple of million shillings worth of assets are retrieved. But we're talking about hundreds of billions. We're talking about trillions of shillings. So for me, so long as the culture of corruption is perpetuated at the very top, as in it starts at State House and trickles down, there is no way the ordinary Kenyan will arrive at a point where the taxes that they pay so dearly will actually translate into services, translate into opportunities, translate into functioning educational systems, like Irungu said. So we have a system of impunity that starts at the top. When you look at the managed equipment service scandal as well, and the fact that many senators voted against it, imagine such a 345-page detailed report telling us how this heist was managed, and it has been politicized, and you have senators who have voted against it. So not a single head will roll. Those 345 pages will join the dozens of reports, will be suppressed, will be thrown away. You know, so we have a situation where no matter where we turn as citizens, there is no respite for us. And until we arrest, investigate, prosecute, incarcerate, restitute, the war on corruption will never end, and Wanjiko will continue to suffer.
All right, you're mentioning arrest, prosecute, and incarcerate and all that. Let me bring in the person who's more or less in charge, or at least someone who comes from that particular side of things. That is Mr. Alex Muteti, the Senior Assistant Director, Public Prosecution. So, Mr. Alex, if you can hear me, let's talk about this bigwigs that Jero has just spoken about, the arrests that we've been seeing going around and so on and so forth. Kenyans obviously not satisfied that justice has been served. We do have some of the bigwigs who were arrested a couple of weeks and months back. Sirisia MP John Waluke, who spent 120 days in jail and was later released. Grace Wakungu as well. Do you feel as though your office is doing enough to satisfy the hunger of the Kenyans in regards to counting the cost of corruption?
Thank you. Let me say this. First of all, I was not very able to hear what exactly the speaker who came in before me said. But following your question, whether we are doing enough as an office, I would say this. As an office, we are playing our part. If you really appreciate the criminal justice system, once as a prosecutor, a file reaches your desk and you make a decision to prosecute, that is based on the evidence that you have been given by the investigator, and if you're satisfied that there is probable cause to proceed,
Right.
then you end up charging this person, of course, on the basis of evidence and then public interest considerations. You're able to make that decision.
Okay.
But let me say this. Specifically, you talked about the Waluke case and Grace Wakungu.
Right.
Well, this is one of those cases that I would say, as an office, we had, for a moment, arrived at a point where we said, fine, if this is the way things are going to be going forward, definitely we are making a major step towards the eradication of corruption in this country.
Yes.
But I must hasten to add that the right to bail pending appeal, that is really a matter for the judge sitting and hearing the matter.
Right.
And then he exercises his discretion based on the evidence that he has looked at. If he feels that, well, these guys have a chance of success on appeal, then he could proceed and grant bail. And I suspect and believe definitely this is what the judge in the matter considered.
Yes.
So for us as an office, the commitment that we can make to Kenyans is this. We will ensure if there is anyone that we find evidence that implicates them in commission of corruption offenses or economic crimes-related offenses, that we will bring to prosecution and make sure that every aspect of that case is brought out.
Okay.
Now, as to what the judiciary will do, I do not want to hold brief for them.
Yes.
Because definitely they are the ones who will now judge the evidence that we present before them and make a decision.
Okay.
So the fact is, as an office, we depend highly on three organs. First of all, if you are dealing with cases originating from the police, you have to depend on them as the investigative agency to give you the best evidence. You move to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
Yes.
Whatever evidence they present to you, if on paper you are satisfied, again, there is good case to forward to court, you do so. Then now definitely you end up with a court that is going to assess your evidence.
Okay.
It may not be very easy for you as a prosecutor to predict what exactly the court will say at the end of the day.
Sure.
But of course, if you are satisfied that there is evidence, then you expect, if that evidence is carefully assessed, definitely you hope that the court will agree with you and probably find these people culpable and sentence them accordingly.
All right.
So as an office, I would say the long and short of it, we are satisfied that we are doing enough.
Okay. A couple of things I've heard you mention there. We shall definitely get back to you on the whole investigative part and how the DCI is coming through for you or against you, if at all that is the case. So do hold on the line for that one. Dennis, let me come to you. As an advocate of the High Court, if you look at the way cases have been handled, corruption cases have been handled thus far from the time that we started facing problems as a country, do you feel as though enough is being done? Do you think that probably things should be done absolutely completely differently, considering what Alex Muteti has said?
You see, as Alex has said, the criminal justice system has stakeholders, and all of them impact on the final decision of the matter. I'll first start by mentioning that I think the DPP's office has done fairly well.
Okay. When
you compare to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, these constitutional changes and the current DPP, and compare that office to now what it's doing, I think there's some level of success.
Okay.
We all agree that this is the only time when a member of parliament being arrested is not a big deal.
Right.
Prior to that, it was impossible to even imagine that a member of parliament can be put in for a day. This is the only time we have seen, cabinet secretaries being arrested and presented in court for charging. A sitting cabinet secretary. Previously, that was impossible to even imagine. It was something that beyond, our imagination. Having said that, I must be quick to say that the DPP's office is not totally devoid of political pressure. That is where the problem is. Because when you look at, and I do not have scientific evidence for this, but when you look at the way people have been charged in court. There are those things that generally, as a practitioner, based on general information that we have, you could easily think that that could be, there are others who could have been charged, but they are never charged. Which means, in our view, there is some level of pressure, which either the office receives, which interferes with them, or interferes with the nature of evidence that is presented to them. It could be directly on the DPP's office, or from the other stakeholders, effectively having a challenge on the quality of evidence. So finally, the DPP's office makes a decision that they cannot charge a particular person because the evidence is not sufficient. But is it because of insufficient evidence? No. It's because somebody within the system knows that for you to be charged, or the DPP to present your charge in court, the evidence must be of a particular threshold. So they interfere with that evidence so that you finally don't get there. They put bottlenecks. So then in the process of the entire process, finally we do not achieve what we need. So I think we need, the DPP's office needs to push with other stakeholders for policy review on those things that affect how they will be able to deliver.
Policy review, very good statement there. Let's look at our question of the day as we get you interacting with us in regards to what we are talking about today, as we are counting the cost of corruption. Now, what would convince you that Kenya is winning the war against graft? What would convince you that Kenya is winning the war against graft? K24 TV across all our platforms. Our SMS line is 21222. We encourage you to let us know your thoughts on WhatsApp as well. Mr. Irungu, I felt as though you had something to say as Mr. Dennis was making a statement. Care to mention or care to say what you think?
Dennis, I think, raises an important point about the quality of prosecutions. And given that we have Alex online, I think it's good to dwell there a little bit. And I think there's been a number of developments in the last 2 or 3 months that have been very worrying. I think, first of all, the office of the DPP is routinely attacked, and it comes with the territory. It's the same thing with the Director of Criminal Investigations and the Inspector General. They will be attacked if they're doing their work properly in the area of corruption. The concern that I've had is that really that in the last few weeks we've seen a number of things happening. So we've seen 2 legal petitions against the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. The first was on September the 3rd, the second is on September the 24th. And those 2 petitions essentially have seek to limit the power of the DPP on 2 regards. One is that the DPP should not essentially enter into plea bargaining with suspects. And why this is very important is because, as we know it, we have a criminal justice system, but we also have a criminal system. And that criminal system has all the complexity of our criminal justice system. And therefore, there is so much collusion in the scene of crime that actually you do need to break off people who have information and ask them to become state witnesses. The second thing that the 2 petitions attempt to do is essentially to block the decisions to charge guidelines that were released about a month ago. Actually, sorry, 2 months ago in July. And why those are really important is that they are essentially, they rest on 2 elements. The first is that every case that the DPP takes on and prosecutes, it must be based on evidence. Now, we have seen a number of cases, not just senators, but whistleblowers, journalists, bloggers who have been arrested by the police without any complete files. So it's almost like you arrest people either on a Friday evening or just during curfew. You force them to sleep a night in the police stations. You then rush them to court and there's no file. And the concern that many of us have as human rights activists is that the right to liberty is critical. So there must be an evidential threshold that is met before people's liberty is taken away from them. The second part of that is it has to be in the public interest. Now, I think these 2 cases are really also part of the complexity around corruption. And I think what's important is to ensure that we don't have a situation like we had in 30 AD in Judea, when Jesus was dragged through a court essentially with a predetermined charge. His evidence that he was the Messiah was never listened to, and of course now for Christians that seems absurd. But the fact of the matter is that he was taken through a court process that was illegitimate, it was unfair and illegal, and then he was crucified and killed. right?
Yeah.
And I think this is the other aspect that we need to think about in terms of the fight against corruption.
Okay.
That it needs to be fair, it needs to be evidential, and it must not be open
Yes.
to the idea that a politician or a powerful figure or a privileged figure can
Right.
pick up the phone and say, arrest that man or that woman. It has to be based on the rule of law.
Jerotich Seii, I can almost see you wanting to get through the screen in regards to what is being said here. First of all, do you feel as though the war against graft is making any kind of headway? And do you feel, or rather, what would you like to see happening today on this particular, the 5th day of October, for you to be convinced that indeed corruption, we are winning the war against corruption?
I think in one of the ways, and again, I agree with what my panelists have said, but one of the things I said last year, and I will keep, is there needs to be a divesting of conflict of interest. So any senior, major politician, starting from State House to the Senate to the executive, that is engaged in conflict of interest activities that will allow them to profit on the backs of taxpayers. That must end. I urged the president himself to start with his family and whatever enterprises his family is engaged in that would lead to a space of conflict of interest. I say divest yourself of that. For me, that is the first step towards fight against corruption is real. Although I agree with Rungu around and jurisprudence following a particular pathway, and that we cannot weaponize. So long as we have a politicized ODPP, for me, we cannot move forward. So it is not so much about big people saying arrest and prosecute that person. For me, it is about big people being able to hide the bodies that they have buried in a manner that they will never be found. That is why oftentimes you hear senior politicians saying, arrest me, show me the evidence. It's because many of them know exactly where to hide the bodies. So for me, yes, I understand that it is complex, but as a simple, ordinary Kenyan who is trying to put food on her table, who's trying to keep kids in school, who is trying to pay electricity, trying to pay water, for us, the complexities of jurisprudence sometimes escape us in our quest for our daily bread. And for us, we understand that corruption starts at the top. And we have not seen any major move at that senior most level to say, mea culpa. We have found ourselves since the 1960s and 70s and 90s embroiled in conflict of interest. And the first thing we want to do is step away. Now, how that translates into investigation, prosecution, that's another pathway. But we need that political justice. Show me one person, one senior politician who has stepped.
All right. Thank you, Jerotich. I've heard you in regards to the what you've said, especially on the conflict of interest, and of course calling out all the way to the office of the president to make sure that going down, things have to change. Alex Muteti, I will get back to you shortly. We want to take a break so that you can respond to some of the things that have been said here in regards to the office of the DPP and how indeed politics may or may not be playing a role in regards to prosecutions. We do take a short break right now, but do not forget, dial *550*4# for your chance to actually win 250 bob worth of airtime. All you have to do is send me that screenshot via our WhatsApp line, and I will definitely get back to you with 250 bob worth of airtime. Do not go too far. K24 This Morning will be right back.